always thought the night shifts at Riverside General were just a job. We nurses are used to the chaos, the screaming, the pain. But the night of February 19th, 1994, changed my perception forever. That night, everything went on as normal. We were seeing patients, treating wounds, calming frightened faces. But when a woman named Gloria Ramirez was wheeled into the emergency room, I felt something ominous hang in the air. She was in a terrible state, her heart pounding like it was trying to burst out of her chest. My co-workers and I rushed to her, trying not to panic. But something was wrong. Her skin was shiny, as if coated in oil, and there was a strange odor coming from her mouth, a mixture of fruit and garlic. I tried to focus, ignoring these oddities, and began drawing blood for analysis. As soon as the needle entered the vein, there was a pungent smell of ammonia in the air. I froze, staring at the vial in which the manila-like particles floated. Suddenly, the world around me spun. I felt my legs give out and my vision began to blur. At that moment, I heard a thud. One of my colleagues fell to the floor. Panic gripped the ward. I saw other nurses and doctors begin to stumble, their faces contorted with pain and fear. "Evacuate!" someone shouted, and I felt myself being pulled into the decontamination area. I lay on the cold floor, trying to figure out what had happened. My mind was spinning with thoughts of Gloria, of the fact that she had just left this world. Later, when I regained consciousness, I was told that Gloria used dimethyl sulfoxide, DMSO, as a home remedy for pain. But when she came to our hospital, this substance reacted with oxygen and turned into deadly dimethyl sulfate, DMSO. This gas was the cause of all the horrible symptoms we experienced. I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister had happened that night. We nurses have always thought of ourselves as protectors, but in that moment, we became victims. The case of Gloria Ramirez remained in my mind like a shadow that will never leave me. I realized that in our world full of pain and fear, even the most ordinary things can become deadly. Every time I hear the sound of a dripping drop or smell disinfection, a cold sweat breaks out on me. I know there is more to what we do than just medicine. It is a game of life and death, and sometimes death wins. I had always considered myself a tough person, but the day I entered a hospital in Michigan, I realized that even the strongest can fall victim to an unseen horror. I was lying in a room awaiting knee surgery when strange events began to happen. At first, everything seemed normal. I shared a room with a few other patients, and we exchanged jokes to brighten the waiting time. But soon I noticed that one of my roommates, an elderly man named George, began acting strangely. He would often grab his head as if he was in great pain. I tried to calm him down, but he only whispered, "Something is wrong. Something is wrong." The next day, George could no longer get out of bed. His face was pale and his eyes full of fear. I felt a chill run down my spine. Soon, a nurse came into the room, but when she saw George's condition, she just shrugged and left. I couldn't understand how this was possible. He had been fine only a few hours before. That night, I woke up to a strange sound. It was a low rustle, as if someone was moving in the corner of the room. I opened my eyes and saw a shadow sliding along the wall. My heart beat faster, and I tried to call out for help, but I couldn't hear my voice. I felt fear clench in my chest. The next morning, I noticed that there were more patients in the ward, and they all looked just like George, pale, with distorted faces. I began to panic. The doctors and nurses didn't seem to notice what was happening. They went on with their duties as if everything was fine. Soon, I began to feel ill myself. Headaches, vomiting, hallucinations all came over me like a wave. I could hear other patients screaming, and it only added to my fear. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't budge. I was a prisoner in my own body. At one point, I saw one of the nurses, with a pale face and empty eyes, enter the room with a syringe in her hands. She approached one of the patients and, without saying a word, injected him. I screamed, but no one paid any attention to me. I felt darkness enveloping me, and at that moment I realized that we were victims of something much worse than just a disease. When I came to, I found myself in a decontamination room. There were other patients around me, but their faces were contorted with horror. I heard someone whispering, "It's the mold. It's killing us." I couldn't believe my ears. We were victims of an unknown enemy that hid within the walls of the hospital. After I felt much better, I learned that everything I had seen was a hallucination, and the cause of all these horrors was an old mold that had settled in the medical supplies. It was releasing toxic spores, and we had unknowingly fallen victim to it. This case became known as cotton mouse syndrome. Google it, and you'll see for yourself. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not just patients, but targets in an experiment that was out of control. Every time I see the hospital, I remember those events. And I realize that even in the safest of places, terror can lurk, and that unseen enemies can be far more dangerous than those we can see. Recently, in a small town in the United States, there was a hospital known for its advanced technology and skilled medical staff. Here one night, a series of gruesome events occurred that will forever go down in the history of the hospital. It was a stormy night, and the hospital was more crowded than usual. Many were affected by the storm that was raging in the state. The staff was attending to numerous patients, and the atmosphere was tense. Suddenly the lights flickered and went out, plunging the hospital into darkness. Backup generators kicked in, but something was wrong. Doctors and nurses rushed to attend to patients, but soon realized that the medical equipment was malfunctioning. Life support machines began beeping erratically, and monitors showed abnormal readings. The situation was critical, and hospital staff struggled to maintain control. As they tried to make sense of what was happening, they heard strange sounds coming from the basement. The sounds of footsteps echoed through the dark, empty corridors, and the staff could not escape the feeling that they were being watched. They decided to investigate, but when they reached the basement, they found nothing. The power outage continued, and medical equipment malfunctions became more frequent. The condition of the patients began to deteriorate, and the staff had no choice. They needed to find a solution, and fast. Just when they had given up hope, the lights suddenly came back on. The medical equipment started working normally, and the hospital returned to its usual hustle and bustle. However, the staff could not shake off the feeling of unease. They later found out that the cause of the blackout was a faulty electrical panel in the basement, and the strange sounds they heard were most likely just the expansion and contraction of pipes due to the storm. However, the timing of the events and the strange malfunctions of the medical equipment made them wonder if there was something more sinister going on. To this day, hospital staff and locals believe that the hospital was haunted that night, and the events that occurred will forever remain a mystery.